Imagine this: a ship, battered and worn, limping into port after a journey that seemed impossible. On board, a handful of skeletal men, barely alive, huddled together, their skin stretched thin over their bones. This wasn't just any ship. It was the Victoria, the last surviving vessel of an expedition that had set out to do something no one had ever done before: sail all the way around the world. And the man in charge, Juan Sebastián del Cano, was someone you'd least expect to be a hero. Just a year and a half earlier, he had been one of the leaders of a mutiny that almost ended the expedition before it truly began. But somehow, against all odds, he and his crew made it back, completing a voyage that would change the world forever. The story of the Victoria and its crew is one of survival, betrayal, and ultimate triumph. It began in 1519 when a Portuguese explorer named Ferdinand Magellan set out with 5 ships and a crew of 265 men, sponsored by the Spanish King Charles V. Their goal was to find a western route to the Spice Islands, a place where valuable spices like cloves and nutmeg grew in abundance. Magellan was a brilliant navigator, but he was also strict and sometimes harsh, which made him unpopular with some of his crew. The expedition faced its first major crisis in 1520, when they reached a place called San Julian in South America. Here, a group of men, including Juan Sebastián del Cano, led a mutiny against Magellan. They accused him of being a traitor, and tried to take control of the fleet. Magellan, however, managed to quash the rebellion and executed some of the mutineers, while others, like Del Cano, were given lighter punishments. The fleet then continued its journey, eventually discovering the strait that now bears Magellan's name, the Strait of Magellan. This passage allowed them to enter the Pacific Ocean, which they had never seen before. The Pacific, however, was vast and dangerous. The expedition faced numerous challenges, including storms, hunger, and disease. One by one, the ships were lost. The San Antonio, one of the ships, turned back early, returning to Spain under the command of Estevão Gomes, who had been part of the mutiny. The remaining ships, led by Magellan, continued on, eventually reaching the Philippines. It was here that Magellan met his end in a battle with local tribes. His death left the expedition leaderless, and the remaining ships, now under the command of various captains, struggled to find their way home. Del Cano, who had been given command of the Victoria, faced a daunting task. He had to navigate the ship back to Spain, but he couldn't stop at any Portuguese ports, which were numerous and scattered across the route. The Portuguese, rivals of the Spanish, would see the Victoria as a prize and would capture it if they could. Del Cano and his crew, now reduced to just 18 men, had to avoid every known port, even those in Africa and the Cape Verde Islands. They were in a ship that was old and decaying, with water seeping in through every seam. The journey was long and excruciating, covering 17,800 miles of the most challenging seas. The crew's survival was a testament to their resilience and the skill of their pilot, Francisco Albo. Albo, a master navigator, plotted a course that avoided the Portuguese and kept the Victoria on track. The men on board were sick and starving, but they were determined to make it home. They took a vow to die rather than fall into the hands of the Portuguese, a vow that they nearly had to keep when they narrowly escaped from the Cape Verde Islands. Finally, after 8 months of hell, the Victoria sighted the familiar coastline of Spain. On September 4th, 1522, they reached Cape St. Vincent, and 4 days later, they arrived in Sanlúcar, then sailed up the Guadalquivir River to Seville. The people of Seville were shocked and amazed to see the Victoria return. They had given up on the expedition, assuming it had been lost at sea. The crew, though emaciated and weak, was celebrated as heroes. They had accomplished what no one had ever done before navigate the globe, but the story didn't end there. The return of the Victoria brought with it a series of ironies and injustices. The San Antonio, which had returned early, had spread a false tale that Magellan was a traitor and that the expedition had failed. When the truth came out, the authorities in Spain were faced with a dilemma. Magellan, the true leader of the expedition, was dead and a foreigner. Del Cano, on the other hand, was a Spaniard and a nobleman. Despite his earlier mutiny, he was celebrated as the hero of the expedition. King Charles V knighted Del Cano, gave him a generous pension, and even credited him with the discovery of the Strait of Magellan and the first circumnavigation of the globe. The true heroes of the expedition, like Francisco Albo and Antonio Pigafetta, who had kept detailed logs of the journey, were largely overlooked. Pigafetta, a Venetian nobleman who had joined the expedition, had written a detailed account of the voyage, but when he presented it to King Charles, it was taken from him and never returned. Albo, the pilot who had navigated the Victoria home, was not given the recognition he deserved. The story of the Victoria and its crew is a tale of human endurance and the often unfair ways in which history is written. It's a reminder that heroes are not always who we expect them to be, and that sometimes the most unlikely person can rise to the occasion and achieve the impossible. The Victoria's voyage around the world was a monumental achievement, one that opened up new possibilities for exploration and trade, but it was also a story of survival against all odds, and the sacrifices of those who made it possible should never be forgotten.